Today, I don't think there's any other announcements. I would like to introduce Dr. James Wall. He also does the oral history thing, and he's got a great presentation for us, and he's going to introduce the panel members. So, James, welcome. Help me welcome him, please.
How's everybody doing this morning? I was informed yesterday that I did not introduce myself before I just came up and started pretending to be John F. Kennedy, so I do apologize for that. I am James, and I run the oral history program here. Louder? Is this good? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. This has been actually a long time coming, and this is a story that I'm very passionate about. Our oral history committee, who I need to thank, and that is Liz Akpawa, Barb Tormellan, Jane Lesh, and the great Dave Steinke. These are people who helped steer me through the early days when I didn't know what I was doing, and continue to help me steer through these days when I don't know what I'm doing. So thanks everybody for coming. We also want to thank MCAT, that's the Missoula Community Access Television, for filming most of our panels here throughout this, free of charge. Montana Pro Audio, and our friend Josh over there, give him a big round of applause. I wouldn't be standing here without a guy named George Gibbs, who's no longer with us, but was a passionate fan of oral history and a real lifer in the Forest Service. He had given the money for this program, this oral history program that we run, based on only one condition, and that is that we explored the lives of the unsung heroes, the people who really make the Forest Service run and hum, and who otherwise might not have a chance to record their life story. And I'm of the opinion that everybody has a story. So if you have a story, come talk to me after the panel. We began this oral history program in 2021 with 0 interviews. We now have over 230 interviews with Forest Service retirees and all kinds of great folks. But today we're here to remember and celebrate the proud history of the Tuskegee Pre-Forestry Program. In the late 1960s, a small group, and I mean small group, of students, professors, administrators, and Forest Service employees worked together to create a pathway for what at the time was called the Tuskegee Institute, now is Tuskegee University, to create an avenue for folks to get into forestry. And this was a very tough thing to do at the time. Of course, 1968, when this program came into existence, it was a very interesting year, a very turning point year. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act are now in the rearview mirror, and the question is, how are we going to make that work? Even though we had those big legislative victories, the Forest Service at the time had fewer college-educated African-American employees than any other federal agency. So this program, which was based in the Deep South, started out slowly, had to recruit students, and they convinced these 2 courageous gentlemen to join, and I'm so happy that they're here, John Yancey and Mac Hogans, 2 of the original pre-forestry students. With hard work and dedication, the program became a sustainable source of talent that reinvigorated the outfit in the decades to come. Alongside John Yancey and Mac Hogans, we have Larry Gatt, who many of you may know from his very valuable work that he does for our museum. Larry was a liaison officer in the early days of the program, and he really hit the pavement, and he got out there, and he got people signed up and got people involved. And we are very lucky to have him here. We are missing one of our panelists, the great Brian Payne, Dr. Brian Payne, who couldn't be here today, but we will hear from him shortly. This is a panel about people. We're not here to argue about politics. We're not here to relitigate the Great Society. This is not a panel about presidents or chiefs or senators or undersecretaries. Okay, yeah, why not? We're here to talk about the beating heart of the Forest Service, and that is its people. Academic history can be a slog. This is insane. I'm used to giving presentations at conferences with up to 8 or 9 people in attendance. If everybody was in a boat and it sank, there wouldn't be a conference. And it wouldn't have to be a big boat. So the typical conference panel at an academic history conference is all about categorizing. When did a certain event happen? What dates can we argue over? History, though, in my opinion, when you boil history down straight to the root, history is about decisions. It's about individual people making individual decisions. Decisions like the decision of a young research forester named Brian Payne, who saw an ad for the Tuskegee job in 1968 on a cork board in Portland, Oregon. And, going against the advice of many mentors and friends, made the choice to move his wife and children to Alabama, down to the deep south. Years later, Brian would be followed by another young man, Larry Gatt, who somehow convinced his wife, Jackie, that yes, it was time to move to Alabama. And Alabama's a great state, but you have to remember that this part of Alabama is the home of quite a few racist nut jobs. Jim Clark, Bull Connor, you might know them. And Larry, like many others, came down to make a difference. Or the decision of 2 intrepid young men seated on the stage to join a completely new, a completely untested program, to study a discipline out of their comfort zone, to move across the country, to deal with the inevitable pushback and tension that arises when the status quo is challenged. And then there's the heroes behind the scenes that you'll hear about today. Tuskegee Professor B.D. Mayberry, who deserves a huge round of applause. B.D. Mayberry was a force of nature, relentlessly, tirelessly promoted this program, and we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. And you'll hear about, B.D. trying to sell this program to folks, and many times people telling him that, we can't possibly fund that program. African Americans are just not interested in forestry. How could you possibly think that? When we think of the civil rights movement, we think of marching in the streets, we think of fire hoses open, dogs unleashed, and the cameras rolling. But what happened after the marches subsided, after the cameras left, when the long and grueling work, not of changing hearts and minds, but of changing institutions, businesses, and the government itself? And so we're here to talk about that work, that long work that has gone on. Brian Payne, unfortunately, couldn't be here today to talk. We did do an interview with Brian when we were in D.C. about a year ago, and so we've cut together his remembrances of his time getting involved in the Tuskegee program. And so, Josh, if you could cue that up now. It's about 5 minutes, and yes, Dr. Brian Payne, ladies and gentlemen.
I spent 4 years in Portland then, and all of a sudden one day saw this announcement on a bulletin board about a job in Tuskegee. Wow. It had been there. It was in our coffee room. We had a little coffee room, conference room and coffee room, and there was a bulletin board in there where they'd post job announcements, and this was some countrywide thing. And one day I took a look at it, and it said they wanted somebody to go to Tuskegee Institute in Alabama and try to help them start a pre-forestry program. And that day there were no black professionals in the Forest Service except I think 2. One was in research. And I looked at that and thought, that sounds interesting. That really sounds interesting. It's forestry, man. It's my profession. I could use my professional training to do something that would help me worked toward a social goal that I thought was pretty important. So I applied, and well, I took the form down. I took the announcement down, and I went into Don Gedney's office, who was in the Forest Survey. I said, "Don, you see this?" He was a real liberal guy, an older guy, and he said, "Oh yeah, I saw that. You can apply for that job?" I said, "Yeah." I went back to my office and I called Almut on the phone in Portland. I said, "How would you like to move to Alabama?" And she said something like, "No, are you kidding? Alabama? That's Bull Connor, that's Selma. What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, there's this job announcement. I'll bring it home. We'll talk about it tonight." So I'll never forget that. It was a big deal. And somehow I just sensed that. So on the way there, well, that gets ahead of the story, but it connects. On the way there, from Portland to Alabama, we drove down through California because I still hadn't finished my dissertation, and I stopped to talk to Henry Vaux, my former chair, and he said, "Well, okay, that's interesting. You're thinking about giving up a promising career in forest economics research for this job." He says, "What if it doesn't work?" The job at Tuskegee to recruit minorities into forestry. And I remember saying, "Well, it might not, but we got to try. It's the right thing to do." And it's just indelible in my mind. I remember the exact words. So that's how that happened. Went down there for an interview and met the head of the department down there, Dr. Mayberry, B.D. Mayberry, whose idea it was to put this together, and he'd worked with the Forest Service people to put this together. And he asked me why I wanted to come down there, and I told him the story about my brother. And then I said, "But for me, I'd just like to do this and use my professional background to come here and do this." And he says, "Okay, that sounds good to me. Last thing we need around here is another damn white black power advocate." And I wasn't that. So I went back to Portland, and I guess we were down there in, that was June or July, and then we moved there in November. And at that point, I kind of closed up my forest economics research. Well, I got back to that eventually a little bit later, but spent 2 years at Tuskegee, so interesting transition. Very interesting. I remember my boss, Vince Duval, he was the assistant director at the Southern Station, who was going to oversee this thing. When we were there together on the campus to interview with Dr. Mayberry the first time, I was wearing my tweed heavy sport coat and necktie, and damn, it was hot. I mean, I guess it was June, and my gosh, this is really something. He said, "Come over here, let me show you something." We were outside of the guest house where we'd been staying, and we walked over under the shade of a great big live oak tree, and he says, "That's how we handle the heat here." Yeah, that was interesting, but that was my introduction to Tuskegee.
Sorry. Brian Payne's one of the funniest, most intelligent, most dedicated people I've ever interviewed, and I'm glad we at least got to see that. I'd like to bring up John Yancey, the man of the hour, to talk about his role in the program, and if you could give him a big round of applause.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm going to stand here so you can see my face. I think I might sit down a little bit later, but it's great to be back in Montana. I came here and I think I went to the Bob Marshall wilderness area and actually went by horseback out there to camp and drank cowboy coffee for the first time. And if you out west, you know what cowboy coffee is, right? Well, anyway, Chief Randy and Chief Vicky, I think Chief Randy told you something that I want to say about this young man who just got through talking on the video. He said, your timing was perfect in so many words. It was right, you was right for the time, okay? And I think he was talking about the politics and all. Well, Brian was right for the time in Alabama, okay? We were talking about something, when Mac and I got into the program, we knew of 3 African Americans in the whole country that had majored in forestry. But there's more research that's been done, and I was going to say this later, but I'm going to say it now because Brian was special. Brian came in, and he kind of convinced us that we belong. We was needed, and he was going to help us to get to where we wanted to go. Mac and I kind of debated a little bit because the University of Michigan came through first, and they said they want a student. Mac was at Tuskegee a year before me, majoring in something else, and then I came in, so I was the first student in the program, but I come back and look back again, and there was somebody else that came in, to Dr. Chihal, who was our advisor, and he said, this stuff is too hard. I don't want to major in it anymore. So he got out. And a little bit later on, Brian came, but you know, it was kind of unique because Brian came in, and I did pretty well my first semester there. And I said, some of my friends said, you need to go into engineering. So I told Brian, hey, I'm going to engineering. He said, no, you can't do that. And he did convince me to stay. So I stayed in forestry. Michigan, California, Berkeley came up first. And since I was the first student, Brian said, you're going to California, Berkeley. That was his alma mater. And I said, okay, I'll go there, but I really want Michigan. Michigan opened the doors, and Max said, I'm going. And I said, Brian, I want to go to Michigan. And he said, no, that's only fair. But that's the type of person he was. But to think about being a white male in Alabama during the 1960s and everything that happened in Selma and all over the place, he was there. He was the first white male, or white person, I hate to say this, that invited me over to his house to eat. And I cherish that moment even to today, that he was a very special man, and he wanted so badly to be here with you guys, but his wife is sick, and he told us that, look, I'm still gonna come. She's doing okay now, I'm gonna come. And then she fell last week and broke a hip bone. So he's there taking care of her. And I'm sure that these 2 gentlemen is going to talk a little bit about their lovely wife, my wife for 52 years. I don't want to get that wrong. I'll be in the doghouse. Wanted to be with me too, but she had recently had a stroke, and it's a mild stroke, so she's doing better. But I just wanted you to know that Brian is a special man. He was so special that I gave this little book to him. It's called Share the Vision. Now, for the Forest Service chiefs and all, you need to know that Forest Service paid for this, okay? I was at Tuskegee. No, I was in Alabama. I was a forest supervisor for National Forest in Alabama as we got ready to celebrate our 25th anniversary. Dale Robertson came down and did a great job. And we got this book. It was written by Dr. Mayberry. Dr. Mayberry, you hear a lot about him, or you heard a lot about him. And it was edited by Dr. Hill, Walter Hill, now was the Dean of the School of Agriculture. Now, it has two special autographs in it. One from Dr. Mayberry to me, and one from Dean Hill to me. But Forest Service, my blood still run green, okay, regardless of what you think. And I want to donate this book to the museum. One more thing. I meant to have done this one first. I gave that book, a copy of that book, to Dr. Payne, and he was so grateful to have it that he ordered a copy of this book for Mac and I, and somehow mine didn't come right away, and he ordered another one for me. So I had two. I said, "What do you want me to do with this book?" He said, "Give it to James." So that is for the library. This is for you, from Dr. Payne. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mac, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about how you met Brian, how you got involved in the program, and how you got here.
I would be happy to. When I get the question about why did I go into forestry, the real answer is initially forestry found me. I did not choose forestry. Like a lot of young black kids who grew up in the Deep South in the 50s and 60s, I grew up on a farm. And we had some woods and a forest on our farm, but trees were used for shade, they were used for firewood, and they were a nuisance that we wanted to remove for more row crops. So I had an image of what forestry was. And I have very vivid memories of watching my father sell mixed hardwood and pine stands of timber to a local logger, and the vivid memories of the smell of gasoline from the chainsaws, the roar of the chainsaws, the sawdust flying, the mud, the men who were lifting these logs onto trucks, and most of the people that worked out in the woods, they were injured, visible injuries, arms, legs, limping. And so from the beginning of school through high school, my principal would say to all of the students, if you don't stay in school, if you don't study, you're going to end up working in the woods. And so, fast forward, I go to Tuskegee, and Brian approaches me and asks me to consider changing my major to forestry. I had an image of this 12-year-old boy watching all of this stuff, and I'm going, why do I need a degree to learn how to do that? And but Brian taught me that about conservation, about environmental management, and he talked about managing forest as a system. And then he said something to me that really caused me to embrace getting into the program. He said to me, if you do well at Tuskegee, and if you finish in this program and do well, you'll get a chance to go to Berkeley, to forestry school and get a degree, go to Iowa State, or go to Michigan. And that's what he told me. But what I heard was, if you do well in forestry at Tuskegee, you can get out of Alabama. And I said, sign me up. But the other part of my evolution to embracing forestry was that Brian, in the Introduction to Forestry Management course that I took at Tuskegee, they had professors, world-class professors from the University of Michigan come down, spend a week, and rotated. And they talked about forest ecology, they talked about silviculture, dendrology, wildlife management, fisheries management, and on the days that they did not take us out into the Tuskegee forest, they would show slides of forest management all across the world. And my image of that changed. And so not only did I trust Brian, learn to trust him, but I learned to trust and respect that forestry was something that I think I would like and enjoy, and that's how I did it, and Brian was very instrumental in making that happen.
Great. Sorry. And alongside Brian, we have B.D. Mayberry, and he was no longer with us, but a Titan at the time. I was wondering if John and Mac, you could tell us a little bit more about B.D. Mayberry and what made him so special. Oh, well, yeah, and Larry knows him too. So any good stories about B.D. Mayberry for the folks?
Well, I could tell you many stories about B.D. Mayberry. Let me just share something. I don't know how you want me to go here, but I went to Tuskegee in 1972. And in those days, we had hard copies of vacancy announcements. And I was working on the Ranger District on the George Washington National Forest on the Peddler Ranger District. And I saw this vacancy announcement. And don't ask me what inspired me, because I don't really know, but I took it home. And my wife Jacqueline's sitting here, and I showed her the vacancy announcement, and she said, "You ought to apply for it." And it was at a research station. The Southern Station was headquartered in New Orleans. And I said, "Why would I apply for that?" She said, "Because if you apply for it, you'll get it." So I applied for it, and she knew more than I did. So I applied for it, and they brought me down for an interview, and I got the job. Well, something you need to know that's very important. The Weyerhaeuser Company gave a $250,000 grant to Tuskegee, a 5-year grant for $250,000 a year for 5 years. The Institute was able to hire a faculty member, the late Dr. Dave Canavera, and we bought a van. They bought a van for us to use. And so I traveled all over the South in that van. And Mac mentioned the business about what professional forestry meant to the black population in the South. And Weyerhaeuser put together a movie. And the movie showed really what professional foresters do. And it was a wonderful movie. And I took that movie with me. And I'll just give you an example. To the north in the Delta of Mississippi, I would go over and visit 11 high schools. And to the north was in Cleveland, Mississippi, and to the south of that was Greenville, Mississippi. And I share this with you because when I'd go to Cleveland and I'd start to show that video, the students would unhook it for me. And I just kept going. You know, I'm not going to go back and plug it in. And when I'd end up in Greenville, Mississippi, the counselor down there, I'm mentioning this because how important it is for people at all levels to help encourage students to do things. And in Greenville, Mississippi, the counselor there was just wonderful. And we had many students that came to Tuskegee from Greenville, Mississippi. And one of them is still a friend of mine today, retired in the Dominican Republic. But it was just unreal for me what Weyerhaeuser did. And I'm not saying this because Mac was with Weyerhaeuser. And part of that was when I would leave and go on these recruiting trips, and I would tell you I went to every state in the South. I drove that van, and people would look at me like, what the hell's this white guy driving a van from Tuskegee Institute? But I just visited the high schools and everything. But the importance of the faculty member there at Dave Canavera was we still had a presence on the campus when I was gone. We had a total presence of the people there. You asked me to tell a story about Mayberry. I could tell you many, but the one that I remember, the Weyerhaeuser Company flew us all out to their headquarters. They wanted Dr. Canavera, myself, Dr. Maurice Maloney, Mayberry, and myself. And they flew us out there to visit their headquarters. And so we went out there, and they wined and dined us it was just unbelievable for me. And we're getting on the plane. I think I told Mac this story earlier. We're getting on the plane, and Dr. Mayberry was just an unbelievable person, had a heck of a sense of humor. And we're getting on the plane, and we're walking to our seats. And he turns around, and every person on that plane heard him say, "Now you know what it's like to go to the back of the bus." and I'll, you know, there's some little things that happen to you that you always remember. But let me just share a couple more, and then I'll shut up. But one of the important things for me was, when I was there, was finding jobs for our students, summer jobs. And so the last year I was there, I placed almost 100 students from Tuskegee and high schools in summer jobs. And I mention that because how important that was for them to get exposed to, other than what Mac was describing, for them to get exposed to what foresters do. And so I would do that. And there might be a person in this room, there's many of you that I may have placed summer jobs with, but I'm going to tell you only about one. Lynn Young, he's here at this reunion, and I visited with him last night. And Lynn Young was in Arkansas. And there's parts of Arkansas where there is not a very diverse population, in case you don't know that. And I placed a student that worked for Lynn Young. And you know how important it was for those students to have an experience that was positive, that it encouraged them to go into the profession. And people like Lynn Young, and there's probably others in this room that I haven't met yet, that I placed on jobs in the summer. And my boss in New Orleans called me, and he said, "Somebody's using your phone." I said, "What do you mean?" We didn't have cell phones. He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You had a $700 plus phone bill." And I told him, I lived on the phone. I was calling rangers, supervisors, company people, everything, trying to find summer jobs for students. When I applied for the job, when Jacqueline encouraged me to do that and I applied for it, when I got the job, the ranger I was working for called me into his office. He was a fire person. So when the ranger called you back to the fire dispatch area, you were in trouble, because he didn't call you in his office. And he called me back and he said, "I just want you to know that you're committing career suicide." Because I was going to a research station, and I was going to Alabama, to Tuskegee Institute. And there's just some things that you never forget. So I think I'll leave it at that. Final thing is, when I first met Mike Dombeck, he was a fishery biologist. When I first met Randy Moore, Chief Moore, and Chief Dombeck, I should say, he was a soil scientist on the forest where I was a ranger. And Dale Bosworth, Chief Bosworth, him and I were rangers together, not together, but we went to training sessions together. And that's how I first met those people. And they did pretty good. Not that I had anything to do with it. So I think I'll leave it at that, James. Thank you.
Okay, you know I'm going to get up and stand up. Is Dr. Stewart and Miss Stewart here? No? What? Where are you? They prayed for me this morning, and I might preach to you in a little bit, But your prayers was welcome, so thanks a lot. As far as Larry is concerned, Larry was one of the most effective liaisons that we had. Now, Brian had a difficult job because he had to get everything started. But Larry had probably more students than anybody during that modern era, and he had them engaged and involved in things from softball to intramural football. They talk about all the things he did, and you know what Mac and I did was go to school. But there's just a couple things. I want to talk about Dr. Mayberry, but I also wanted to mention something that you probably all know. When Mac and I got started, and Dr. Mayberry had to sell us on the program, there was 3 known African-American foresters in the country, okay, in the country. We found out since then that there was 3 others. There was 3 others that, but one came along with us, and that was Chip Cartwright, and probably most of you in here know Chip or know of Chip. Chip was 2 years ahead of both Mac and I. But we also found out about a young man that Brian called Uncle Paul. Have you heard Brian tell you about Uncle Paul? Okay, Uncle Paul was an African-American from Tuskegee, Alabama, who decided at some stage in his life that he would live as a Caucasian, as a white person. Best me in my voice. And so he spent his whole career until he died not necessarily representing African Americans, but now his family want the service and all to claim him as being an African American at the time, and we do. So, you know, but it's delicate. He didn't want to be one, but we're claiming it. Now, most of you probably know, if you think about it, Gifford Pinchot got his license degree in what, 1891, roughly. Forest Service got established in 1904? 05, okay, thank you, Gail. Gail has been my champion for a long time. We've been on, but thanks, Gail. But did you know of a gentleman by the name of Ralph Blount? No? Somebody heard of him. Ralph Blount was the first African-American forestry graduate. He graduated in 1908, University of Pennsylvania. The University of Pennsylvania, but it's the other Pennsylvania, not the University of Pennsylvania. And what he did was he went to school, got his degree, and he came back and they put him over a nursery in Pennsylvania, okay? First graduate. They didn't like that. They didn't like that. So Paul ended up leaving the forestry field, and he got into a successful yard man type activity, and he did extremely well. But he was the first in 1908. Look him up if you don't know about him. Now, Dr. Mayberry was my hero. Dr. Mayberry and I met in the spring of 1968. My vocational education teacher took me down there to meet him because I had seen him, and he asked me, he said, "Man, what you gonna do when you graduate?" And I thought I was gonna be smart. I said, "I'm gonna be a teacher just like you." And he said, "No, you're too smart for that, young man. You need something else." So he took me down to visit with Dr. Mayberry. Dr. Mayberry treated me like a grandkid or something. I meant he brought me in, or it was on a weekend, he spent quality time, he didn't try to rush. He told me, he said, "You know," have you heard of the Tuskegee Airmans? I said, yes. He said, have you heard of the nursing program down here? I said, yes. He said, have you heard of the VA program here at Tuskegee? I said, a little bit, yes. He said, forestry is going to be just like that, but it's got to have you in it to do it. So he sold me on forestry. And Dr. Mayberry and I have been friends and acquaintance through the years. And, I got him to write the book and paid him to write the book. And he went to numerous activities with us. We actually went to Seattle to visit Mac. Mac hadn't said it, but Mac was vice president of Weyerhaeuser Corporation. And you should have seen the place he had us to eat lunch at, with his name on the billing. But Dr. Mayberry was funny. He told me, and I'll sit down after I said this, he told me a couple things, but one that stuck with me, he said, where will we be when we get to where we're going? Think about that. And I thought about it, and I said, what? But he wanted me to think about the program and the fact that we could be like the Tuskegee Airmans. So I'll leave you with that. Dr. Mayberry was special. Rest in peace, Dr. Mayberry.
Dr. B.D. Mayberry, we used to call him B.D., but he was probably the most charismatic person I've met in my life. But he was also the architect of this program, and he was like a Pied Piper. He pulled together people from agencies, from the industry. He got students involved, he got faculty involved, other universities, and I view him as the architect of that program at Tuskegee that brought John and I here today. I will also say that he was a door opener. He never encountered a door that he couldn't open. And he opened doors, and he not only developed the program, but he actually built a pathway. He built a foundation for us to have very, very productive careers. And I don't know if you remember the Smothers Brothers, but they used to have this saying, and so Dr. Mayberry loved John the best. And so he never invited me to some of those little soirees and everything, but he did give me some advice. He said, I'm gonna open this door for you, but once you get in there, it's up to you what happens behind that door. And he was also my wingman, and I didn't know that, but when I applied for the job with an executive at Weyerhaeuser, after he said hello to me, the first thing he said was, how is Dr. Mayberry? He said some good things about you, and I look forward to our time together. I had no idea that this man was not only building this program, but he was the epitome of a servant leader, someone who was leading from the front and the back and led us to the place that made that program so successful at Tuskegee. And that's my memory of this great man.
John and Matt, going from the Deep South to Berkeley to Michigan to Iowa State could be a rough transition. I was wondering if you could talk about how you go from a completely different society, how you were welcomed, or how people greeted you, how you made your way into forestry from the pre-forestry program.
Oh, boy. Cal Berkeley was a really good and eye-opening university, and I really enjoyed my time there. Northern California can be a little bit tougher on people of color than I would have thought before I went out there. But I made it. The dean called, my mother was dying of cancer, and I decided I needed to get closer to home. And the dean called me in and said, you know, you've taken all the hard courses, you're gonna graduate from Berkeley. And I said, I gotta go. My mother comes first. So it was an adjustment. The students didn't open their arms. Some of them did. My roommate was great. He actually had the, well, you don't know who he is, so I can joke about it. He had the marijuana seeds in the room, and he told me I could get them anytime I wanted to, and no, I didn't, okay? I did not, but he was a super person, and most of the students was really super then, too. I was a little shell-shocked, you know, coming from a culture-nurturing place like Tuskegee, and that's one reason Tuskegee is so special. It's because it nurtures you and gets you ready for the real world that's out there. And it's always there for you to fall back on. Our state was a little, I actually, believe it or not, Auburn was not in the mix, but because of the connections that some of my family members had, the dean of the School of Forestry at Auburn offered me a position there, a scholarship there. But our state was, had opened their arms up to me, and they had told me that they would be there for me. And since George Washington Carver had gone to school there and gotten his PhD from there, I decided to go to our state. Looking back, Dale, we all look back, I sometimes think that maybe I should have stayed at Berkeley, but I didn't, okay? And I have no regrets.
Well, when I was at Tuskegee, I had a chance to meet most of the professors at the University of Michigan that I would interact with and be in their classes for the next year or so. So I had a good exposure to these professors, and there were so few students at Tuskegee, I spent a lot of time getting to know them and them knowing me. So they were not strangers when I went there. But I will tell you a story that I think may be funny. If it's not funny, it's perhaps a little bit quirky, but it's true, and it pays tribute to Brian Payne, and it talks about a little bit about the University of Michigan. So when I was at Tuskegee, I got my letter from Michigan to be accepted to go and complete my forestry degree there in their program. And Brian knew that Michigan was much bigger than Tuskegee. He was worried about culture shock, and so he said, I've made arrangements to fly you from the deep south to Michigan, meet with the professors, meet with the faculty, meet with students. And I said, okay, sounds great. So we get on a plane, and as we're sitting on the runway, I share with Brian something I never told him. I looked at him and I said, Brian, I've never flown before. And he looked a little bit surprised and I think a little bit shocked, but he starts talking incessantly and trying to distract me and get me, get me comfortable. And so the plane started taxiing down the runway, and as it was taxiing, it started bouncing. And I just went nuts. And Brian said, oh, this is nothing. This is routine. This happens all the time when you're flying. So the plane gets airborne, and then they make a sharp turn to the left. And I go, oh, God. And Brian says, this is nothing. This is routine. Don't worry about it. You know, you're going to be just fine. So the plane levels off. We get up to cruising altitude, and Brian said, you know, Mac, when I fly, I always get my kids a souvenir from the airplane. How about if I get you a souvenir? And I'm sitting going, a souvenir? And he said, I always get them a plastic glass that has the image of the airplane. I call it the airplane glass. Would you like one? And I said, oh, sure. So he whispers to the flight attendant, and she brings over 2 glasses, except that they have Coke in it. And so I sip a little bit of the Coke, and I said, man, this Coke tastes a little funny. And and he said, now, whatever you do, don't just sip it a little, just sip it, you know? And so I was sipping, and I was watching Brian. So when Brian would sip, I'd take a sip. And we'd hit an air pocket, and I'd go nuts again, and my knuckles were just frozen to the armrest. And then all of a sudden, I'd start relaxing, and Brian...
Wonder why.
And Brian is talking up a storm, and he does not let any dead air get between us. He's just talking and talking and talking. And so I'm sitting there, and I start relaxing, and he says, you know, and we hit another air pocket, and I'm just fine with me. And so, and Brian says, you know, that was nothing. Don't worry about it. I fly all over the country. I fly internationally, and we never have any problems. And sometimes when I fly internationally, we're at 30,000 feet now. Sometimes we fly at 45,000 feet. And I said, Brian, when you fly that high, does the Coke taste a little bit funny to you? And he said, well, it's not just a Coke, it's a rum and Coke. And I say to myself, does he know I'm not 21? And so Brian, I said to Brian, to myself rather, I say, here I am. The forester is flying in a plane. He's flying all over the world. He's doing all of these great things, and he's drinking rum and Cokes. Man, this forestry profession must really be something. I can't wait to be one. And of course, we get to the university, and the faculty is so great. We get to the college and the University of Michigan. The faculty is wonderful. They introduce us. We meet with the dean. We meet with faculty members. We meet with students. They let me sit in on a class. And so my introduction there was quite interesting and very positive.
And no Coke.
I have one Brian story that didn't make it into the cut. But similar to Larry, I mean, this is a sales job. I mean, you're getting out there, you're trying to get students involved. And Brian was at the very beginning of that process. And he's really making his own rules. And that is one thing I will say, is that the Forest Service, if you read Share the Vision, which is a fantastic book, Brian talks about how he had no idea what he was doing, but also that the Forest Service gave him, and I think it was Tom Nelson was the Southern Research Director, let him do what he wanted to do, let him make mistakes. And that, I think, was a very important part of the story. But Brian would go around and sell the program to people, and one of the things he did was to combat this stereotype that, you can't make money in forestry. He would go to high schools, and he would go to these assemblies, and he would wait for his turn, and they would bring him up, and then he would say, I've heard that, and I'm sure you've heard that you can't make any money in forestry. And people would say, yeah, of course. And so then he would bring out a tree, a small tree, that he had stapled a bunch of dollar bills to. And he said, you probably heard money doesn't grow on trees, but I'm here to tell you that it does grow on trees, and I'm going to teach you how you can make money in this business. And that's the type of guy that Brian was, or Brian is. A very special person. I don't think we'd be here without him, but that was just my story that I wanted to volunteer for Brian. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead. We've got some time.
Okay. I'm standing up because of all you over here and all of you over there so you can see my pretty face. Look, I really want to leave you with just one food for thought. Mac and I and Larry and Brian played a major role, and James is doing the same. Life is about being like planting a tree, realizing that you'll never benefit from the shades it produces. So that's all we've done. We planted a seed for others, and I know I got Mary Sue and some others out here that I've touched. I touched the chief a little bit, yeah. And I'm just thankful that I've been able to do that. So do it for yourself, do it with your grandkids, do it with whomever you see. Don't stop it here. We'll fight some tough times now with what's going on. We got employees that are suffering, and yet there ain't a lot we can do about it. We can do a lot of praying, but we got to get ready for whatever is going to take place next day, tomorrow. Just don't sit back and do nothing, but we got to champion those people that helped us to get to where we are. I thank you. Oh, thanks for everybody for coming. Boy, I have never seen this many chiefs before together. Thank you guys. And regional foresters and all of that. So we got some great people here, and I got somebody out there. What is it, Sally? Who's going to do my book for me? Donna Sinclair. Where are you?
Sinclair, yeah.
Don't forget, you're supposed to, I gave my book away now, so you got to give me a copy, okay? But thanks you guys for everything.
Well, I assume that we're getting close to the end, so I really want to thank the Forest Service retirees, James, Liz, and the folks with the museum, the Forest Service History Museum, for inviting me to be a part of this. I worked for Weyerhaeuser for most of my career, but I spent 5 years working for the research arm of the Forest Service. And it was a great experience. And I think it prepared me, if I had any success at Weyerhaeuser, I think the Forest Service was a big part of that. And I learned so much, and I also had a chance to visit most of the national forests. I had a chance to go out into the woods. I worked with the district rangers. I even wore the uniform while I was doing research. And the respect that I received from fellow employees, the respect from the public, it was a special time in my life. And so I thank you for this opportunity, and I wish all of you the very best. I wish the Forest Service the very best. And I think John was offering a challenge to how we continue the great legacy that this company started back in 1905. And so I guess I would challenge all of us to be courageous. Good talent comes in all shapes, sizes, colors, gender, and I think at one time all of us were probably diamonds in the rough. But you've been polished. I think I've been polished. John, Larry, James.
I'm still working on it.
But I would encourage you to be courageous and find those gems, those rough diamonds, polish them, and you'll be rewarded for it. So, thank you.
All right, Larry, you want to take us home? It's, you know, the one thing that sticks out to me is that Brian and you and all the liaisons, no matter where they went, this was their favorite job. I was wondering if you could just talk about what that job meant to you.
That's very hard to do. It had a profound effect on me and my family. Our daughter was 2 to 5 years old when we were at Tuskegee. And the experience, I have no doubts that she's a better person and a more, I don't know how to explain it, person today because of that. And she was only 2 to 5 years old. And I could tell you stories about her and us that you don't want, you'll be here till dinner. Because we were there 3 years. And it was a life experience that affected all of us. We did not expect it. I didn't, at least. I don't know what Jacqueline did, but we didn't expect that. But it was an experience that shaped the rest of my life and has affected my family in a positive way. And I get to share that story with a lot of people over the years. And as long as I'm still around, I'll continue to do it. And I can't say enough good things. I mentioned earlier summer jobs and that. I can't say enough how important it was for people in this room and people that are out there today working to help make these things happen for these people that we're trying to get into forestry and so forth. So I just say, go for it, and if you have any contacts in your local community, anything you can do, do so. Thank you.
I thought it was over, but I did want to close with, I'm not going to pray or anything like that to you. Tuskegee University is undergoing accreditation right now, and it should be accredited in 2028, which is 3 years from now. The program has changed some, but not a lot. They're still searching for students, they're still searching for money. The program has changed where there's 4 universities out west, no, 3 out west. University of California, Davis, I don't know how Berkeley got kicked out, but it did. Washington State, and there's one other out west I can't think of right now. And in the southeast, it's North Carolina State, and Auburn University is in the mix. And then there's 2 other universities. But the way the system works is 2-3 or 3-3. 2-3 mean that you go to Tuskegee for 2 years and take the basic courses. Then you go to the other university like Mac did to take forestry and other courses. And so that's still set in motion, or they have right now what they call 2-3, and you can go to one of these partnering universities and you can get a BS in Master in Forestry, Master MA, or you can go a little bit longer and do an MS. So the program is still alive and well, but they're searching, trying to get their basic foundation to keep going on like they have for the last 60 years. 3 years from now, we'll celebrate the 60th anniversary. So it's something to think about. But again, I'll sit down. Thank you, guys.
Before you leave, we have one more thing. We have a gift for all of you. Liz Agpawa, Barb Tormillan have really spearheaded this, so I'll let them take it from here.
Is it rum and Coke?
Not rum and Coke. So when I've gone to Tuskegee, where I met both John and Mac on different panels, one of the things about Tuskegee and generally the South is they always give you a little gift before you go, and it's always something in the tradition. So Barb and I have two things, and I have the first one, and traditions are important, and fun traditions are important. And when these chiefs here, thank you for joining us up here in front of the table. I mean, don't they look marvelous? Yay! It's so nice to have you all right there with us. One of the things that we did in the chief's office is when we want to show a particular gratitude, we get a Smokey Bear and the chief signs it. Wow. Yay! And so very uniquely, we have this great opportunity that all the chiefs at the table here signed these Smokies and that they're on their hat. Yay! And we have one for Brian too, so we'll get his mail to him. And so those are really, really special because I don't think we've ever had a Smoky with that many signatures on it. Okay, and Barb has something really special too.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for the tradition, for your commitment, for your guidance through the decades. It's really humbling to be with you. You're iconic, and this is a piece of the chestnut tree-like column. Some of the extra, it's not going to bring the house down. It's a charcuterie board made by Ralph Egan's. And the reason we're presenting you with chestnut is because it's an Appalachian, it's a southern species. Appalachian, it runs basically from Alabama up to Maine. And this happened to be harvested from Toma, Wisconsin in, let's see, 2 years ago, huh? 2 years ago. It's the last wild standing stand of chestnut that we are aware of in the US. And I say that with pretty good authority. It's from the American Chestnut Foundation that we were able to connect with a private forest landowner who had been holding on to it as long as he could, and yet the blight kept surfacing. The parent trees are like skeletons. They were brought to the farm in the late 1800s. There is a 1904. 1904 is when the blight came in. The seedlings that were established prior to the blight. The trees were brought there prior to the blight. So this stand, not in Appalachia, was free of blight and continued to grow. And and eventually it has migrated west to this stand as well. So this has it's not wormy at all. And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's whether you call this a veggie tray or a cheese tray or a charcuterie board, we'd like each of you to have one. Oh, rest are down. Oh, well. Yeah, there are some for each of you. There's one for each of you, but they're heavy. and we'll help you get them home, we promise. So, and each, yeah, that you can take with you, John. So thank you all, and we'll make sure Brian gets one too.
All right, that's all, folks. Thank you so much for coming, and we really appreciate it. Thank you to Larry, thank you to Mac, thank you to John, thank you to Brian, and all of you.
Let's really recognize, pretty special event here, folks. Well, what a way to start the day. Congratulations.